Okay. So I want to welcome all of you who are joining us for this webcast. My name is Peter Young. I'm a member of the Committee 100, and I happen to be head of an investment bank, Young & Partners, serving the chemicals and life science industry. And I'm very, very happy to have as my guest Ben Meng, who is the CIO of CalPERS. Before I introduce him and we go through the fireside chat, first of all, this is part of the Committee of 100's Career Ceiling Initiative, which will be a series of webcasts as well as conferences to try to highlight the problem, which some people call bamboo ceiling, facing Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, all Asian Americans in this country and across many different professions. For those of you who may not be that familiar with the Committee 100, it's a very proud nonprofit that was started 31 years ago by a number of founders, including I.M. Pei, Yo-Yo Ma, etc. And its purpose is really two things. One is to promote the full participation of Chinese Americans in American society and acting as a public policy resource for the community. But the other is to advance the constructive dialogue and relationships between the peoples and leaders of the U.S. and China. This particular initiative, the Career Ceilings Initiative, obviously is part of the domestic mission to try to be a resource and helpful to Chinese Americans and, of course, to Asian Americans as well. The members of the Committee 100 are a diverse set of people from all walks of life, whether it's industry, the arts, music, or government. And we're all like-minded in terms of our desire to try to move forward with those two missions. With regard to this overall program on career ceilings, we really have sort of four objectives. One is to try to help people understand how bad the problem is. And we had a webcast on February 4th that dealt with that issue. Second is to communicate and share what's being done across this country by different organizations and individuals to address the problem. And third, to try to come up with ideas and collaborative relationships with people to try to find new ways and improved ways to help solve the problem. But the other is, and that's what the purpose of this webcast is to find some individuals who can share their personal stories about their own career paths and the obstacles that they faced and the lessons that one can learn from that. Because you can talk about studies and data and so forth, but truly hearing stories from individuals who've gone through the experiences really is a much more meaningful way to really understand the issues. And with that, I'm very, very pleased to have Ben Meng, who is the Chief Investment Officer of CalPERS, as I mentioned, as our guest today. He has had an extraordinary career, but first and foremost, he is the first, not only Chinese American, but the first Asian American to hold the position he has as the Chief Investment Officer of CalPERS. I'm sure most of you know CalPERS, but CalPERS is the fund, the pension fund, retirement fund for the public employees of California, and they manage a mere 400 billion of assets. So they're a very important player in the world of investing. He's had a long career. I won't mention it's in the invitation, but also he'll explain. But the end result, as a U.S. citizen born in China, he ended up returning to CalPERS and became the Chief Investment Officer. So with that, last thing I want to say is this event, where after this introduction, we'll spend about a half an hour with a fireside chat with Ben, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. And the way that you ask questions is just to use the chat box and just type in your question. Both Ben and I are going to be able to read them, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. So with that, let me start and just say, maybe, maybe for those people who don't know, maybe you ought to just describe what is what is the job of the CIO of CalPERS and what does that entail?
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Meng. I'm currently the Chief Investment Officer of CalPERS. So what does the CIO do at CalPERS? So the CIO manage the investment office of roughly about 400 people and manage the investment portfolio of about $400 billion assets that are invested in major asset class such as public equity, fixed income, private equity, and real assets. And the 400, as I said, that we invest, we manage about $400 billion, and every year we pay out about $24 billion in benefit to our retirees. And among that $24 billion, almost 60% of the $24 billion payout benefit comes from the investment return. So the investment, managing the investment portfolio is quite important aspect of CalPERS. And
Yeah,
the other thing, as you know, everything we do, the success comes with a teamwork and focus. So from that perspective, the investment office works very closely with our CEO, Marcy Frost, and her executive team, the board, stakeholders, and internal staff very closely. And together, we're very disciplined, innovative, and principled, and optimistic. And our job is really to provide the retirement benefit and secure their retirement benefit through managing the investment portfolio.
so all the retired firemen and teachers and all those government work, they really depend really on CalPERS essentially for their retirement benefits and so forth. So it's a very important job from that point of view.
That's correct. And we serve about 2 million members. So that's
Mhm.
not a small number. That's
Yeah,
not a small number.
yeah. No, that's absolutely not. By the way, there's no such thing as a small number in California anyway. We all know that. So, so before we talk about your career, though, maybe you could talk a little bit about your personal history. Where were you born? Where you grew up? Maybe the schools you attended before you started your professional career. And I think you're like many people that there's kind of a varied history of your growing up, right?
Yep. Um, I was born and grew up in China. And like many other immigrants, I came to the United States for better opportunity, better education opportunity, and for better life. And when I was 25, I was accepted to University of California at Davis. And back then, as I said, I was only 25. I just packed my backpack and off I went. Um, Now looking back, life back then was tough. But back then I didn't feel that way because I was fearless, I was young, very hopeful, and I believe that if I come here, if I study well and I work hard, I will do well. And that's kind of exactly what happened to me.
Yeah,
And as I said, 1995, I came to UC Davis, which is based in Northern California. And during that time, I also developed a deep love for California and for United States because it offered boundless of opportunities as long as you're willing to work hard and be a team player. The chance of that you will be successful. And then later also I became the U.S. Citizen, of which I'm very proud of.
yeah. Ben, we've noticed that the volume of your voice is lowered, so I think you might want to speak a little bit louder
Okay.
going forward.
Yep.
Now, one of the things, so in a sense, your story is very much a common story of an immigrant coming to the U.S. and succeeding, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So now, if you look through your career, you obviously had you did change jobs and you changed your responsibilities on your way through your career. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about what some of the reasons for some of the major career changes that you made, but also to what extent did you feel that there were some obstacles, whatever they may be, along the way that maybe were presented difficulties as you tried to move forward?
Yeah. So speak of changing jobs, um, in finance industry, I first so well. Let me backtrack a little bit. Let me start with a personal story. When we were young, uh, uh, one of the questions your parents always ask you is, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" Right? And my story, and to this date, my mom still remembers. When I was young, when my parents asked me the question, and I told them that I wanted to be a shop owner, and they were surprised because most students or most kids will say they want to grow up to be a doctor, policeman, scientist, or astronaut, right? But I wanted to be a shop owner. So my mom probed, asked me why. And when I was a young boy, I'd find the shop owners because they have a lot of keys. And
Hmm.
they hang up their keys on their belts. And when they're walking around, the keys clinking, making all the sound. And the key to me, I was fascinated by the key because the keys can open so many doors.
Hmm.
He was able to open the storage room, the cash register, or the front door. And what's behind the door was always fascinating me. And the reason I brought up that example is that when you change jobs, because that gave you a different perspective, and each of a different experience or different door you open up, what's behind is a different perspective and different experience. And as you know that you run investment bank on Wall Street, people come from all walks of life, right? There are definitely economists, trained, financial economists, investors, but there are also historians, artists, uh, English major, literature major. So all very diverse. It's a very diverse field. And if you look at my career background, I have been in the sell side first, and then buy side, and then asset owner. CalPERS is asset owner, right? So I've been on the sell side and buy side asset owner. I'm being a trader, really frontline, fast-paced, a flow trader, a risk officer, researcher, and then running, a part of a hedge fund strategy, then running asset allocation, the bigger picture, and then now, I became CIO. So uh, all this diverse background empowers me and making me a better investor. So when you change career, change jobs, it's not a bad thing at all, right? To making sure you are learning different perspective, using all the knowledge you gain, because investing, particularly in today's market, is a global market. You need to have a global perspective and diverse perspective. So
So
that, yeah.
Ben, are you telling me that because you didn't become a shopkeeper that you failed in your career?
Yes, I I failed my own dream.
See, I'm now convinced that you really did not have traditional Asian parents because in my generation, they never asked you what would you like to be. They just told you what they wanted you to be, right?
Right.
So so
Well,
you had rather liberal parents, I
parents,
think,
right?
by Chinese
But
standards.
but yeah, but it doesn't mean that didn't worry them, because now
Yeah,
after I grew up, my parents shared with me after I told them what my dream was when I was young. They
yeah.
got concerned. They didn't say anything. They said, "Wow, what is he going to grow up with?" Right? If that is aspiration, just become a shop owner because the keys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a
So
good story. But tell us a little bit about, I'm sure along the way, yeah, there were some obstacles that were uncomfortable. Some may relate to your ethnicity, some may relate to something totally different. Can you mention some of those along the way and how you dealt with them?
yeah, absolutely. So speaking of obstacles, so first I really want to commend you and the speakers, Bak Ji and Harris Long from the first webinar. Uh, Both of them and plus you did very solid research, analyzed the issue. From what my understanding is that for the Asian community, the representation in terms of a percentage in the labor force is well represented. But the challenge Asian community faces is the rank from the middle rank to the executive level. So how do we break that? I see a few obstacles. Some of them are external, some are internal. And let's just stick to what the previous panel identified the challenge, or not the challenge, the phenomena. We're trying to address why there's a lot of middle rank Asian managers, but fewer at the executive level. For one, we need to think about it from a mid-level manager to executive, the different jobs. Mid-level manager is still a lot of it's about doing the job yourself, being executive is about managing the people and managing other people well, so that the whole team, you move the organization forward. So when people ask me what my philosophy, of building a team, managing people, and it's not that different from managing portfolio. You want to diversify portfolio depending on your goal, your risk constraint or tolerance. Then you put the talent with different attributes together as a portfolio, as a team to tackle that particular task. So when you move from managing technical work yourself, doing the technical work yourself, to managing people, require different skills, and more likely that needs more softer skills, or people say EQ instead of the IQ part. So that is external reality. We had to realize that from middle rank to executives, there's a lot of work we need to do, not just Asian Americans, all Americans, if you move from middle rank to executive. So that's a different kind of requirement. So that I call external. So in my career, I've been there for almost 20 years in the financial industry. And have I seen some obstacles, particularly the external factors? When you see it, making sure you're your own advocate, you stand up and speak up. When discrimination happens, it's not just Chinese American lose, or Asian American lose, or Latino American lose, or African American lose. All American, we all lose, right? So when you see that, definitely speak up, be your own advocate. And the other thing, also build allies. You don't. This is not a fight that we can win just by ourselves. Build allies with not only Asian community, a broader community together. As I said, that this is an issue. If you see a challenge, that's a challenge to not just Asian Americans, to all Americans. So these are
And
yeah.
a number of people are still saying that your voice is too soft.
My voice
So
is soft.
I actually think it's the microphone, not your voice. So
Okay.
maybe you have to compensate and speak louder, because
Yes.
a number of people are having some difficulty hearing you,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
as well.
Okay,
So
so give me 1 second. Let me talk to my technical support.
sure.
Maybe something they can do behind the scenes. So the volume, can we turn up the volume? Yes. Okay, so I will speak out louder, and
Yeah, much better.
they just turn up the volume.
Clearly, Ben, the reason why you weren't successful early on is that you didn't speak loud enough, right?
Yes. Totally.
So we have the evidence here, right? You
Right,
needed to speak louder, right?
Exactly. So we'll be our own advocates, build the allies, make the issue known. So these are external factors, but there are also some internal factors. So internal factor is more of our control. And some of the internal factor, one of them I observed is, and also I keep on reminding myself, when something, if we don't get what we want, we apply for a position or a different job, we didn't get it. And it's just human tendency that, we naturally fall back to, it's something out of my control, it's bad luck, or they don't recognize my talent or contribution, it's someone else's fault, or the environment, or some other factor holding us back. That may be true, but our human tendencies we almost always automatically default to that. And I call that victim mentality. And if we always automatically default back to the victim mentality, the danger is there that we'll lose a great learning opportunity, right? Yeah. There are times there's external factors, as I addressed, what we do, but also at the same time, do not always automatically default back to be a victim. We didn't get what we want because we were not treated fairly. Can be true, it may be not, it may be not true. So we need to analyze that, because there's certain factors is within our control, and do not miss a learning opportunity. How many times in our career, no matter how successful we are, you are very successful, right? There are many times that we didn't get what we wanted. The important thing is what we take out of that experience, what we learn from that experience, and how to improve ourselves. So
yeah, and right. And I think related to what you're saying is there is a cultural thing. By the way, it is also clear, and I think in the previous webcast with Harrison Lung and Buck G, they pointed out that some of the issues are actually self-created, right? Yep. Which is partly old generation, where the attitude among Asians is, if you work hard and study hard, you will succeed, but not necessarily realizing that there are other skills, EQ skills, or other kind of skills. I mean, like in my case, my parents said, oh, if you just study hard, you'll succeed. And I had to help them understand that there were things like being in sports or student government or things like that, that are part of society's way of helping you succeed. But it was a battle. But I also
Yep.
think that that actually is a generational thing, that as each generation goes by, there's gradually a shift to recognize that there are these other factors. But, I think you're absolutely right, which is there are some things that we can't blame on society, right? As a reason why there's an obstacle. It's almost self-created, right?
Yep. And then the other thing I see, or trend I see, mistake we tend to make is the other one I call the entitlement mentality. Just because we're a minority, we're entitled to something. Yeah, I'm firm believer that everyone is entitled to a level playing field, to equal opportunity.
Right.
We are not entitled to any special treatment. And with that kind of mentality can hurt us again. That may hold us back. The victim mentality, entitlement mentality can hold us back. And that's something we can do. That is within our control.
We talked before this fireside chat. I think one of the things you mentioned was the importance of mentoring.
Yes.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about it. And it's not just mentoring by other Asian Americans, it's mentoring in general. And
Yes.
I know that you feel that that was a very important part of your success.
Yep. So again, from the first webinar, both Bak Zi and Harrison Long talked about mentoring, or the lack of a mentoring in the Asian community. And my comment in our private conversation, I mentioned that we should not limit ourselves only to Asian as our mentor, potential mentor. We should broaden it out. And if you look back, I look back because of the webcast. I'm fortunate to have had so many great mentors in my life, in my career, and not all of them are Asian. Actually, majority of my mentors are non-Asian successful people. And also we know that few people become successful on their own, and the mentorship is critical. And also we know that we learn if we have not personally experienced something, it's harder for us to learn. But then for your mentor who is much more experienced in the industry, and they are willing to share with you their personal experience and struggle, and how they get, how they became who they are today. And also they know you through the years, they know you, they can really pinpoint to your shortcomings and help you to realize what you need to do. So the mentorship is critically important. And again, as I said, I'm fortunate I have a lot of mentors, my parents, friends. I can go on, a long list of them.
Yeah, so it's not just mentors within your company. It's also mentors outside as well, as you mentioned, right?
Yes.
That are important. And of course, the funny thing is, by definition, if it's within your company and you're one of the few Asian Americans, by definition, if you just limit yourself to Asian American mentors, it's rather limiting, because by definition, it's going to be a small number.
Exactly. And to this date, I just give one example. One piece of the great advice I have, received from one of my mentors is really knowing yourself, knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at. And I can give you a very simple example. I'm a non-native speaker when it comes to English. So I would not want to try to compete for a job as a news anchor, right? News forecast anchor because of my English. So, but you need to know what you're good at, what you're not good at, and also to learn how to turn your disadvantage to your advantage. So this is just one example of what great things I learned from my mentors.
Yeah, well, it was really funny, and there's a quote. Well, there's also this a comment that often Asian Americans aren't good mentors, or they're not motivated to be mentors. And actually, one of the previous panelists on our previous webcast said, well, it's not unusual for a successful Chinese to say, well, I'll see you at the top of the mountain if you ever get there, right? So,
Yeah.
So I think there's some truth to that. It's not entirely true.
Yeah.
But I do think there's probably a little less of a tradition in the West for, Asian Americans to be good mentors to people who are younger. So for those of you who are on this broadcast, who are in a position, a more senior position, to help more junior Asian Americans, strongly encourage you to try to mentor them, and don't just meet them at the top of the mountain, right? Uh, so, is there any advice that you might give more broadly to the Chinese Americans and Asian Americans who are listening? Just broadly, and not just in the investment community where you are, but
Right.
just broadly in terms of career success, because obviously we're not just talking about the investment community. It could be the arts, or it could be in politics and so forth. These are all very important parts of society. Any comments or advice that you would give them?
Yes. I wouldn't say advice, but just something when I look back myself, when I came to the United States, 1995, with nothing, a backpack, as I said, a backpack, a scholarship from UC Davis, and off I went. There are a few principles I think is very important. For one is be kind. Be kind and treat other people how you would like to be treated. But at the same time, be kind doesn't mean be weak. You have to be strong and tough and be your own advocate. So be kind and also be ready and be willing to make tough decisions. And the other thing is really be curious enough that you always want to learn, right? And be humble enough to know that you can always learn something from someone else, from anyone, and there's always great learning opportunity that you can get better. Also, as I said, I'm a firm believer of teamwork. There are people, but fewer people make a success out of, by themselves. So make sure that you work with a team, has the team-oriented mentality, and also so these are things to do's, and don't to do's. Don't automatically fall into a victim mentality or the entitlement mentality, and then by the end of the day, show results. So if you go back to my career, I work at private sector on Wall Street for a number of years. And as you know that on Wall Street, private sector, particularly Wall Street, is very performance-driven, high accountability place. And also on Wall Street and private sector, generally speaking, their business objectives are clearly defined. So once you know the firm you work for, you know their business objectives, if you can align yourself with the firm's objectives, acquire the right skills and work hard, the chances that much higher that you'll be successful.
Yeah, that's right. How if I know probably that there are times where there was some explicit discrimination, right, aimed at you. How have you dealt with that, and along the way? Because I'm sure I certainly suffered many times, right, from discrimination in different settings. But I'm sure that happened for you. But is there any comment you have? I'm not asking you for a specific example, but just how have you dealt with that in a way that you feel is important lesson to people?
Yeah, so exactly. So we need to separate out the external factors and internal factors. And I know sometimes the heart is not black and white, right? So again, as I elaborated early on, knowing the external factor, what to do, stand up, speak up, the external factors, and then the internal factors, what we can do better. So that has been my approach to these, and also constantly knowing that again what you're good at, what you're not good at, and work on your weakness, keep on improving yourself. And the other thing advice I have is that that what I was trying to say in private sector, the business objectives tend to be more clearly defined, right? And you can understand that, then you can realize is that where I have a structural comparative advantage or disadvantage. So in a way, you can choose what kind of job or which organization you work at. And for example, CalPERS, I'm working at CalPERS now. CalPERS is a public agency and very proud, of our missions, which is to serve those who serve California. And more importantly to me, CalPERS is very open-minded. The organization very open-minded, and the leaders here from the board, our CEO Marcy Frost, they value diversity. They have a global perspective. They are performance-driven. They want talent. So that's something we can do as well. Do the homework, right? And then figure out which battlefield you want to be on, and then you figure out strategy.
Yeah. One thing, and at CalPERS, did the leadership, did the CEO, do you feel that they who were facing any special considerations or pressures when they were making the decision to make you the CIO because you were Chinese American, or do you think it was just one of many factors but not anything of significance?
I would want to say more the latter case, but I cannot speak for the search committee and the CEO on this topic. But from not this specific question, but from my observation, my working with them past and this time, I'm a returnee to CalPERS, right? So from my own experience for here, more than 8 years now, I can say with full confidence about our CEO, our executive leader, and the board. What's their belief and what's their action.
Yeah, that's right. Well, one positive thing about being in the investment business is you have to get results, and they can measure the results.
That's exactly.
It's one of the few professions where every year or every quarter whether you did a good job or a bad job.
Yes.
And you're compared to other metrics and so forth. There are a lot of professions where you don't have that. You don't have a concrete measure of performance that you can use to support your
right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. In private sector, when they clearly defined, high accountability place. If you look around, look at what are the parts that have most of the immigrants or Asian immigrants? Silicon Valley. Well, why? Because it's results-driven, performance-driven, and very innovative. And the other side is on Wall Street. You see some, successful minority on Wall Street. And exactly for one of the reasons I believe is that because so performance-driven, the result is so clear cut, right? And that's one of the whys is that when we develop our career, there are certain things like external factors will change it. Build allies, over time will change it, but it won't change overnight. But we have a choice. We can pick which field and which field to go in and which company you work for.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think that's one of the considerations for the people in the audience here, which is as you think, first you're saying, know yourself, know what you're good at, et cetera, because no matter whether a profession is easier or harder, if you're Asian American, you should ideally only go into professions where you feel you're going to be very talented, right?
Yes.
But this other thing is this issue, which is to the extent that there's room for discrimination because it's hard to measure, right? Performance, right? Well, one thing that means that your job is very similar to the 100-yard dash in the Olympics, right? Because it's easy to measure who won, right?
Right. But also on that note, we're a long-term investor, so it's not a 100-yard dash. We're probably doing a marathon here. So CalPERS is a marathon.
Oh, so it's a marathon, right?
Marathon, exactly. And also it's an elephant running a marathon because we are so big.
Yeah, no, that's right. So what I would like to encourage people is to ask questions, and let's see. We've got a number of questions. Let's see whether we have one that can work. Well, there's some really long questions, right? Okay. There's one comment, and I don't know if it's a question, but maybe you can react to it. Lloyd says, a lot of these Wall Street or corporate firms have cultures that put a strong emphasis on fit that are often used as a gate to prevent minorities or non-white males from entering their firm or advancing at the firms. Some kinds of hurdles present in supposedly meritocracy industries are very subtle. For instance, white superiors who are more comfortable. So I guess there is a question somewhere in here, which is, what are your thoughts on this? And I guess that's the first part of the question, right? Which is, do you agree with that or not?
I want to say personally, I have not experienced that kind of what he meant by fit or kind of a unspoken criteria a firm runs. Maybe because I'm being in investment on on the private sector side, and then on public sector, I'm fortunate to be with CalPERS, right? So I have not picked that up acutely, but I'm not saying that it's not there, but I have not seen it. So here's the challenge, Peter. When we say this is subtle, we sense it. So again, let's go back. Sense is different. It's just a phenomenon. We sense it. Can we get down to the deeper and what's the root cause? And once we know the root cause, what are the external factors? What are the internal factors? If we just sense it, it's very easy. Again, go out to talk to friends. I think there is a culture like this, right? And I have some data points, but not really very direct data point. You cannot draw the direct connection. And it's very easy for you to build a victim, a supporting group or a sympathetic group together. So again, I'm not saying that it does not exist, but if you feel it, ask another layer of a question. What are the causes, right? And do some fact checking on that. And then, once you can do a deeper diagnosis, then the treatment, quote unquote treatment, then we know what to do about it. If you just sense something is harder to react or have a game plan or for people to comment on.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, and there's a whole flurry of questions here, but they're not so much questions, but also observations. And I think that one of the observations that people seem to make, which fits with what you're saying, 2 or 3 of them basically have said, it's very important to look closely at a company or a profession they're pursuing, because there's some big differences in terms of how hard it is to succeed no matter what you do as an individual. And I think that's what a number of people are saying, and saying, do a really good job of assessment of the company and the industry before you leap, because there can be some big differences. I think that you agree with that, right? Basically,
yes,
right?
Yes. And the thing about you, Peter, you run an investment bank yourself. I know you, so I know you, and I know you would not discriminate anyone regardless. But pretend that you run an investment bank, right? And you have one employee who contribute more than half of your bottom line of your investment bank.
Yeah.
Would you care that he or she or a different minority background? Unlikely, right? So go back to the point. Pick your industry. Pick the company. You can observe. You can talk to people before you go to a company. You can get a sense of the culture, or just go on their website to do some of your own homework.
Here's a question from John Tang. He said, what advice would you have for prospective mentees in figuring out the right questions to ask when seeking to build a mentor relationship?
Be assertive and be proactive. I wouldn't name names, but many years ago, I gave a talk at the CFA Society. And after the talk, one of the Asian gentlemen approached me with his business card and very kindly asked me, Ben, can I have just 5 minutes of your time, right? And I said, yes, more than 5, let's sit down and talk. And after that, and then later, he became a full-time employee at CalPERS as well. And I stay close to him. I wouldn't call them officially as a mentor to him, well, more like a friends.
Right.
Go to events like this, join organizations like this, right? Be your own advocates and go out. The opportunity rarely comes to you on their own. So you have to go out to look for the opportunity yourself. That's what people say, luck favors the prepared. So make sure you're prepared. Go out, proactively seek the opportunities and talk to people.
Here's someone who had an interesting question. And what percentage of your success in becoming the Chief Investment Officer of CalPERS do you believe was due to your technical abilities versus your abilities, your professional networking abilities, or political support? Interesting question, right?
Right. Backtrack a little bit. Everything we do happens in life. There are always two components: skill and luck, right? And I have been lucky. I've been fortunate enough. I have been more lucky than others in my career development. But let me be not humble for a moment, but not all luck. So there are some skills in there as well. But when I look back, I think both. In early of my career, you had to prove yourself on your technical abilities, right? When Wall Street hire you, they literally have a real job for you to do. So make sure you can do the job.
Right.
But when you do the technical job, you can prove yourself, and also learn and grow to become to develop the software side of the skills, networking, and then you can grow. You can grow as as the opportunity size broadens out.
Yeah. So actually, you're basically saying that it changes over time, right?
Yes.
Which is, you're saying early in your career, often it's your technical skill that becomes critical, but as time goes by, more of the interpersonal skills, as well as a little bit of luck, right?
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep.
By the way, I believe in luck, but I also believe that there are people who can make their luck, right?
True.
And can change the odds of success.
Yeah.
But I
and
do
the
think,
other.
Go ahead.
No, sir. The other thing I really want to emphasize on is, I cannot emphasize enough to be kind, right? This is a long journey. No matter what you do, be kind. But as I said, be kind does not mean to be weak, but be kind to people, to situations. Always try to learn and try to be a team player. What I benefit a lot, I benefit from my mentors, right? And I have made a habit to almost every Thanksgiving, I send all these mentors email to thank them again. And some of the surprises are bad. That's like 15 years ago. You still remember that? You're still thanking me for this and that? I say yes, because I continue to benefit from your wisdom. So be kind part and then develop the network from early on. People don't become your friends overnight, become your mentor overnight. So at the beginning can be tough because you're doing the technical work, try to prove yourself, right? And you have to be, you want to be kind, develop the network, but you don't see the fruit right away. So I have to be kind and be patient. That's my advice. I see a lot of people get rich and successful overnight. Not a lot of them, but there are people who can do that. But there's another strategy that be patient, stick on course, and be kind, working hard.
Yeah. Now, Ben, one of the nice things about being in your position is that CalPERS invests in many, many funds and many, many different companies. So no matter what, it gives you a perspective looking across many different companies and their leadership and so forth. One person here had a question that says that they believe that there are some differences in success by different Asian American groups, whether it's South Asians or Koreans, Japanese or Chinese. Do you think that's true? And as you observed, do you feel that that's true? And are there any comments, as to why you think that might be true?
Actually, that I didn't think of that question until I watched the first webcast. The first webcast, try to break it down in different Asian, East Asian, Southeast Asian.
Right.
So and I believe the data that's the first webinar presented. So from that perspective, I believe there is a difference. However, again, go back to my earlier comments. We observe the symptom or the phenomena. We need to go down deeper. If I can throw in technical jargon, if the difference are statistically significant, then we need to find out what is causing them, and then we can have a better diagnosis and then have a better plan. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have not studied this topic well enough to give you an answer, but from the first webinar, the data that Bak Ji and Harrison Long presented seems that there's a difference between different Asian groups.
Yeah. So there is a difference, and why that's true and so forth is a much more complicated question, I
exactly,
guess, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Here's one other question, which is, were you proactive in, because we were talking about how important mentorship is, were you proactive in trying to develop certain mentorships, or which ones just happened to show up because someone took a fancy to you and thought highly of you, or was it a mix along the way?
I would say more proactive.
Mm-hmm.
More proactive. Uh, when we go to school, there's a lot of opportunities. You meet alumni, professors, and if you do well in the class, the professors, they have their professional network. They may introduce you to their friends. And at work, the same thing. Once you go to work, you start meeting a lot of people. And as I said, join association organizations like Asian, whatever Asian, the field you are in. If you are in investment, maybe join the Asian Investment Manager Association. There's such association out there. Uh, you know, uh, Again, proactive, be your own advocacy. Would mentors took a fancy on you and then kind of a job on you, say, hi, can we be friends? Let me mentor you. It hasn't happened to me, but maybe it happens to other people. But to me, it's my own experience. I really proactive go out and talk to them, but not obnoxiously, right? I'm not writing to all the successful people in investment. Can you be my mentor? Can I get to know you? Spend 5 minutes. That's not what I'm saying either.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Victor Kuo has a question, and he says, do you think there are such things as structural racism or structural barriers to Asian American advancement? It seems like what is being presented in this panel is much more heavily about one's own agency, skills, and attitudes. Even if there are structural, do you think they're not worth discussing because there's not much one could do? I guess he's saying you're spending a lot of time talking about what you can do yourself, and the answer is because they seem to feel that we're talking more about what you can do. Do you feel that way, or are there some things that you want to comment more about the structural barriers to success if you're Asian American?
Yeah. So before I comment that, my colleagues just give me the flag. I need to go back to the meeting pretty soon. So maybe this will be the last question, or maybe I can take one more question. Lisa, I don't know actually. That's why I want to applaud you and Committee 100 putting this series of webinars together. And let's examine this issue and dive in deeper. As I said, that I was very pleased to see the first webinar. You and Bach and Harrison put a lot of data together, very rich body of data. I didn't have the sense of that before. And I know I'm the first of such a series. I know you have a number of webinar scheduled. So I look forward to, toward the end of this project, I look forward to, review the results and have, a private discussion with you again.
Yeah, to end this, I will express my own view, and that is there's still very, very substantial structural and racial barriers in this country. There's still a lot, in fact, maybe even increasing racism in this country in the more recent years, and that is a serious issue. And I do think that self-awareness and self-initiatives are part of the picture, but I do think it's equally true that there are barriers. And when I first came out of business school and started work, there was no question that there was a severe, shall we say, disadvantage of being Asian American. And in fact, because I'm not 20 years old, where I went to school, they had a quota, and now it's changed, but there was a quota at my school, college, of 15 total Asian Americans out of 1,200 new freshmen every year. So it was even worse then, but it's still not totally solved. So I think the answer to the person who asked that question is, yes, there are, there are structural things. Maybe they've gotten a little better, but they're still very, very very, very significant, and some are very explicit, and some are rather subtle. So with that, I want to end this by thanking everyone who has attended. We had a large group of people watching, and thank you for your good questions. And I want to thank Ben and Meng for taking this time and sharing, with the audience your view about this. And we congratulate you on your success. And clearly, you don't believe that we should all meet you at the top of the mountain, right?
Definitely not. That's So I will do whatever I can to help the Asian community and the community at large, not just Asian community, the community at large. Whatever I can do, and if there's other things I can do on this very important topic, I will be very happy to be part of it.
Yeah. And
thank
for
you for
all the rest of you, there will be a whole other webcasts and conferences and so forth, and we'll let you know about it. But I'm very, I feel this is an important issue that we need to be aware of and find ways to improve. So thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Ben.
Thank you for having me.